This ain't just another leak. This feels like that exact moment everything flips. The point where a story we thought was done suddenly starts unraveling in real time. What once looked like a sealed case is now getting ripped open layer by layer. And right in the middle of it all stands Joe McCann, while a shadow forms around Kevin Gates as alleged recordings move into federal review, now under federal scrutiny. This ain't noise. This is the shift. Let's break it down quick. What was once treated like a closed chapter, an arrest, a conclusion, a done deal, is now being dragged back into spotlight again. Because these newly surfaced voice recordings are not just random background chatter. According to sources, they may indicate something far deeper, something still ongoing. We're talking alleged voice notes, timestamps, updates being shared, communication that didn't happen just once, but possibly before and after everything went down here. And that's where things stop feeling simple. Because if a fraction of this is real, then this wasn't just a moment. It was a sequence, a timeline that changes everything completely. The emotional impact hits different. A family that's already carrying unimaginable loss is now being pulled into a deeper storm. The possibility that the truth wasn't just hidden, it was lured. That what everyone accepted at first might have only been part of a much bigger picture. Now look at how this played out. At the beginning, quick conclusions. Limited questions, then silence. But now everything is shifting. Recordings are emerging. Scrutiny is rising. The narrative is no longer stable. It's moving, evolving, expanding. And cases don't just reopen after an arrest again. Something has to push them. Something has to force that door open again. So naturally the questions start getting louder. Was there more happening behind the scenes? Were certain connections ignored or never explored even? And then come the details that make everything feel heavier now. Alleged contact during travel. Constant updates. A chain of communication investigators are now breaking apart piece by piece carefully. When you zoom out, it stops looking like a single person's story. It starts feeling bigger, more complex, more connected. One reaction online summed it perfectly up. If these recordings are real, then everything we thought we knew wasn't the full story. And now there's no slowing this down. The attention keeps growing. The pressure keeps building. The demand for real answers is getting louder by the second. So now we're left with one chilling question. Are these leaks finally exposing the truth that was hidden all along? Or are they just revealing how much of the story we still don't know? Because at this point, this doesn't feel like an update anymore. This isn't just another so-called leak. It's the exact moment everything flips in the messiest way possible. A case everyone thought was finished is suddenly unraveling live in real time. What once looked like a sealed, tidy conclusion is now being ripped open layer by layer for everyone to watch. And right at the center of the chaos stands Joe McCann, while Kevin Gates' name gets dragged into a narrative that refuses to stay buried. Here's the reality nobody was prepared for. What looked like an arrest giving the case direction may have only created the illusion of control. For a moment it felt like everything was narrowing, like the story was finally locking into place the way people could almost accept. But that sense of certainty is slipping fast, as circulating reports say investigators are revisiting everything, focusing on alleged voice recordings and communication trails, suggesting something far more layered than originally believed. These aren't random fragments anymore. The alleged voice notes under review, call records showing repeated contact, and messages being broken down for hidden meaning. Together they form a picture that doesn't feel simple. And if even a small part holds up, then this case was never about a single moment. It was a chain of moments, a sequence unfolding the entire time. And that realization changes the emotional weight instantly in ways no one expected at all. It's about whether the story fed to everyone was ever fully true anyway, which leads straight to the question nobody can shake. Are these alleged recordings finally exposing what was hidden? Or are they just the first crack in a much bigger story still far from being understood? Because at this point, this doesn't feel like some simple leak. It feels like a timeline that was never fully revealed. A case that once seemed contained is now unfolding in layers, each one raising more questions than answers. And right at the center of it all remains Joe McCann. While the alleged recordings tied to Kevin Gates keep pushing investigators to reconsider everything they thought they knew. What once looked like closure now feels like a setup. An arrest that gave people confidence, a narrative that seemed stable until it wasn't, because these alleged recordings aren't being called isolated clips now. They suggest continuity, movement, ongoing interaction. Voice notes reportedly reflecting updates over time. Call logs indicating repeated contact. Communication patterns now being examined, not just for what was said, but for when and why it was said. And if even part of that aligns, then this wasn't a single incident frozen in time. It was something that progressed. That's where the emotional impact deepens again. Because this isn't just about new information. It's about what that information implies. A family that once waited in silence is now facing a more difficult reality. That the truth may have been unfolding quietly all along, just out of reach. And once again, the timeline tells the story. At first, everything moves quickly. A version of events is presented, accepted, and locked in. Then comes the silence. And then everything shifts, recordings surface, and suddenly a case that was supposed to be over starts expanding again. That contrast isn't minor, it's everything. Because when something grows after it's been declared finished, it points to one uncomfortable truth. Something wasn't fully understood the first time around. And that's where the theory starts gaining weight. Was there a hidden layer of communication shaping events from the background? Were certain connections missed or simply never followed through? Because the moment patterns of contact enter the investigation, the focus changes. It's no longer just about what happened, it becomes about why it happened. And that's where the story turns heavier. Now look closer at the details being discussed. Alleged contact continuing across different locations. Mentions of updates being shared in real time. A sequence that investigators are now trying to rebuild piece by piece, like fragments of something that was always there, but never fully seen. And when those fragments begin to line up, it stops feeling random. It starts to feel intentional, structured. Zoom out, and the bigger picture becomes harder to ignore. If these connections hold any truth, then this case goes beyond individuals. It becomes about the system around it, how it was interpreted and possibly misinterpreted. Why certain details surfaced late, why the narrative stayed so narrow for so long. One reaction gaining traction online says it best. If these recordings are real, then the truth didn't begin where we were told it did. And now there's no avoiding the escalation. Public attention is rising again. Speculation is intensifying. The demand for real answers is louder than ever, because this isn't just about what happened anymore. It's about how much of it people were actually allowed to see. And the deeper this goes, the harder it becomes to separate what was known from what remained hidden. Which leads to the one question no one can ignore. Are these alleged recordings finally revealing the full sequence of events? Or are they just exposing how much of the story is still missing? Because now this doesn't even feel like a standard investigation anymore. It feels like something that was unfolding in real time, just out of sight. A case that once looked controlled is now breaking apart into layers, each one revealing something new. And at the center of this expansion remains Joe McCann, while the alleged recordings connected to Kevin Gates are forcing a deeper, more uncomfortable reevaluation of everything. Here's what's becoming impossible to ignore. What once felt like the ending is now being treated like the starting point. An arrest that brought closure is now raising more questions than it answered. New claims emerging, new connections forming, a narrative that refuses to stay still. But this is where things take an even darker turn. Because according to circulating reports, these alleged recordings don't just point to contact. They suggest continuity, structure, timing that investigators can't easily dismiss. Voice notes reportedly capturing updates as they happened. Call patterns indicating repeated ongoing communication. Timestamps now being cross-checked against key moments in the timeline. And if even part of that stands under scrutiny, then this wasn't a single incident frozen in place. It was something that evolved. That's where the emotional weight hits hardest. Because this isn't just about new evidence. It's about what that evidence could mean. A family that was already searching for answers is now facing something even heavier. The truth wasn't hidden in one moment, but unfolding step by step right in front of everyone without anyone fully realizing it. Now look at the timeline again. At first, everything moved fast. A version was accepted, direction locked and felt final, then silence followed. No deeper digging, no expansion, no questions raised about what was decided. Alleged recordings surfaced, and everything started shifting. Shift doesn't happen randomly, usually means something wasn't fully understood. It starts to feel intentional. That's when the tone of the entire case becomes heavier than ever. Because now this isn't just about actions. It's about coordination, awareness, and possible influence. And the moment influence enters the conversation, the scope expands beyond individuals. The focus turns toward the system itself. What was known early on? What wasn't pursued? And why are these layers only coming to light now? One reaction gaining traction perfectly captures this dramatic shift. If these recordings are real, then truth didn't just vanish. It was never fully seen before. And now escalation has reached levels that simply can't be ignored anymore. Public attention is no longer passive. It's intense. Every detail is being dissected. Every gap is being questioned. Because this isn't just about solving a case anymore. It's about understanding how narrative was built in first place. Why certain details were highlighted and why others stayed buried beneath the surface. And the deeper this goes, the harder it becomes to separate the original version of events from what's now emerging. What once looked like a clean, straightforward timeline now feels layered, overlapping, shifting, incomplete, and that changes how everything is understood. The emotional weight hits one last time. A family still searching for answers. A public still watching closely. A story that refuses to settle into one clear version. Because at this stage, it's no longer just about what happened. It's about whether the full truth was ever meant to be revealed all at once. And that leads to the final, unavoidable question. So now it all comes down to one question. Are these alleged recordings finally piecing together the full sequence of events? Or are they only exposing how much has been hidden beneath the surface this entire time? Because this is the exact moment where the story stops being controlled and starts unfolding on its own right in front of everyone. What once seemed contained is now cracking open from every angle. And with Joe McCann still at the center and alleged recordings tied to Kevin Gates now under serious scrutiny, the pressure isn't fading, it's intensifying. This story is far from over, and what comes next could change everything. If you've made it this far, don't look away now. Stay locked in because every new detail matters. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and be the first to catch every update as it unfolds. Drop your thoughts below. What do you think is really going on here? Are we finally seeing the truth, or just the surface of something much deeper? Share this with someone who needs to see it, because the more eyes on this, the harder it becomes to ignore. This isn't just a story.